Good evening, everybody. A little bit not what you're expecting. I know, isn't it great? Anyway, welcome to the Thursday night segment of the Outer Realm. We, oh, hold on. I am totally being overrun by technology. Anyway, welcome officially to the Thursday night segment of the Outer Realm. We're broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 from the Gulf Coast and 107.7 FM from New Orleans. We're fully sponsored by the amazing people over at Folgers Coffee who have been a part of our journey for the last few years. So thank you, Folgers. We couldn't or wouldn't want to do it without you. Also, thank you to Justin Snicker, aka Dr. Snick, the Sonic Surgeon, who is responsible for the intro that you normally hear. He's an award-winning composer of Halloween horror, sci-fi, and dark wave electronic music, which can be found on all of your favorite streaming platforms. Also, big thank you to Steve McGinnis, the artist behind the banners and logos here at the show. Check him out on Facebook and Instagram. Also specializes in the horror genre, but does phenomenal commission pieces. So, judging, of course, by this incredible video that you just saw, um, it is pretty fantastic, actually. Curse Waters, I have to say, I can't say enough good things about it. But I feel the same way about our guest this evening, Jason Hewlett, who's back in the Wayback Machine. It's been a while since he's been on, and so grateful to have him back on. He's going to be talking about his book, The Legend of Ogopogo, Canada's Loch Ness Monster from Small Town Monsters Publishing. And I have to say, I've read the book, can't say enough good things about it. I really can't. I'm going to basically post a picture, and I will eventually go in and add a link to Amazon or wherever Jason directs us, so you guys can go and check it out as well. So without further ado, Jason, hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. A little bit of a mishap with the tech over there. It's like hearing things. Where is that coming from? So it was trying to play itself over for me again. So must know how much I love it. So
that's good.
I know, right? It's great. So, gosh, everybody in the chat room, you guys are filling up. Thank you so very much. It's just great to see all of you in here. Remember, we're on Roku TV tonight. We're on Rumble. We're on X. We are on 3 different YouTube channels, and we are on the Outer Realm Facebook page, to which this will disappear afterwards. And you're going to have to go to YouTube or to Rumble. So, yeah, that's right. Because Facebook doesn't deserve it. So I know, bit of a rant tonight. So, Jason, how are you? How are you?
I'm good. I'm really good, thanks. Busy. Life keeps trucking along. But no, things are really good, actually. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I've also super busy and God, trucking along, I guess, would be an understatement. I think I do a lack of sleep these days, but it's good. You know, you're breathing. Which means you're
positive
alive
when you're breathing and upright.
Yes, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. So you have this book that's out, and I'm going to present this. I'm going to bring it up on the screen for people to see it, because it's just, I was really, when I saw this come up on your feed, I'm like, oh, this is amazing. I love it.
Isn't it a great cover too? Easton Hawke did the cover of it, and it's fantastic.
It's great. And you know what it reminded me of right away is, have you ever seen the movie The Water Horse?
Many years ago.
Yeah. It's old, but as soon as I started, delving into Ogopogo, it was just like, oh my God, this is the Water Horse. This is great. But reading your book was just amazing, because you touch on so many things. And I love Ken Gerhardt. He's been on and just so reputable. I'm so glad that he collaborated with you and spoke to you about this too, because it just goes to show it's got a really long reach. It's not just here in Canada for us Canadians.
No, and I think that's what's interesting about Ogopogo, because I know Loch Ness Monster gets all the press, right?
Always, yeah.
All the press. Which is, I've been there. It's amazing, and I love the Loch Ness Monster.
Yeah.
But Ogopogo is probably like the most documented lake monster of them all. Wow. When you go back into history and into the indigenous people that were there before, like there's been stories about Ogopogo, or as they like to call it, Nsnaha Itku, for thousands and thousands of years.
Did you have to practice for that? Because
Oh,
honestly,
I've
I
butchered it.
couldn't. I tried.
I think even in the documentary, I didn't quite get it right when I said it.
Wow. It's like, I'm never gonna get this.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a lot to it. So when you say the most documented, as in sightings and how long has this been going on? I don't know where you want to start. Do you want to start with what prompted you to write the book with personal experiences, or do you just want to get right into the meat and potatoes of what this is all about?
I mean, we could start with, I guess, the writing of the book, which
Yeah.
came down to with my previous publisher, who Pete Ran and I wrote 3 books for them.
Wow.
We had like one more book on the contract, which I always hate starting the story with that.
The
So I
need.
had to write one more book, but Pete wasn't
Yeah.
really, he had health issues at the time, so he wasn't
Yeah.
able to do it. So it was up to me to write something. And I live in Kamloops, British Columbia, which is 2 hours away from Kelowna, which is where Lake Okanagan is. And so
Yes.
I've grown up with the Ogopogo story.
Right.
When I was a kid, we would holiday in Kelowna a lot because it had really good shopping and restaurants and stuff, and it was closer than driving to Vancouver. And so I'd have to go like to Lake Okanagan in the park and look at the water for Ogopogo, and they have the statue.
The statue's cool. Yeah.
Isn't it cool? It's awesome.
Yeah.
So I've just grown up with the story. I've grown up with the story. I have an uncle who believes he saw Ogopogo, even though he doesn't believe in paranormal stuff or anything like that, but he's
Yeah.
convinced he saw Ogopogo. And
Yeah.
so I thought, well, why not write a book about Ogopogo?
Right.
And so literally about the same time that I started researching it, I did an interview with Eli Watson, who ended up directing Cursed Waters, and he's one of the filmmakers involved with Small Town Monsters.
Right.
And the STM team was coming up to Canada to work on a documentary on Bigfoot, which became On the Trail of Bigfoot, The Origin. And they were filming in Harrison Hot Springs, which is kind of where the birth of Sasquatch happened, like the
Wow.
name and stuff.
Yeah.
And Eli had a few extra days free to work on his own project, and he wanted to do something on Ogopogo. So he's like, I'm going to be in Kelowna later this year. I'm going to work on this documentary about Ogopogo. Do you know anything about it? And would you like to come and help me with it? And I'm like, well, I just literally started researching a book on Ogopogo. And it just, both projects, the book and the film kind of just went from there. And through the course of the months, Small Town Monsters was interested in picking up the rights to the book, which they did.
Ooh,
They published it.
congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. So the book and Cursed Waters are both Small Town Monsters productions, and the book is like an accompaniment to the documentary. Like it's not like the documentary is not an adaptation of the book, nor is, the book directly influenced by the documentary, but they're both kind of entities that exist together.
Yes.
Which was cool. And they both premiered at Monster Fest last June in Canton, Ohio. So that was pretty
Beautiful.
cool.
Yeah. Beautiful. It's a great film.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's we had 2.5 days to make it.
Well then, what do you say to that?
No pressure.
No pressure. Magical.
Eli had to work on the Trail of Bigfoot, The Origin, and I was interviewed for that as well. And so it was just, and so everything was very strategically planned to like the minute, and then everything fell apart a day and a half before we went to shoot it. So we put it all back together at the 11th hour, and it just worked out. It worked out beautifully. And the response has been amazing. Unfortunately, it's still not available to screen in Canada.
It's not.
We horrible,
why do we you make it here and we get ripped off?
Well, it's out of Small Town Monsters' hands too, right?
Yeah,
it's something that happened with distribution. I mean, you can watch in the States, you can order the Blu-ray.
Yes.
We did screen it in Vernon,
right,
at the Town Theater, which used to be the dance hall that the Funny Foxtrot song originated in.
Oh, that's funny.
I thought was really cool. The dance hall that became a movie theater. And that's where the term Ogopogo starts. And I guess that's really where you can get into the complicated story that is Ogopogo / it's Nahaitku.
Honestly, I can't even say I've tried. You just rolls off your tongue. I'm just like, I don't know, yeah. Anyway, with that being said, because I'm sure I'll hear you say that a few times during the night or evening. So before we get to that, though, have you had any experiences yourself?
No, I haven't.
Did you just fall in love with the legend or the mystery of it, or
just fell in love with the legend, the mystery of it? I mean, when I first really heard about it, that's, I was also into Sasquatch, like monsters were cool, right?
Yeah, of course.
So I was like In Search of were around, Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World. So I heard about the Loch Ness Monster. And then when you sort of hear that you could have something like that that's 2 hours away from your home, it just becomes this captivating concept.
Yes.
And Kelowna really embraces it. It's a tourism draw for them. They make like postcards, they've children's books, stuffed animals,
Wow.
Ogopogo taxi company. You know, I mean, it's off the charts,
But I'm
really.
glad because, it's a nice way for a community to benefit from its folklore.
Huge, huge. I mean, for them to, I guess, acknowledge it for one, and then
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
really, it
huge.
brings people there specifically to look for Ogopogo, or just because they've heard the story and they want to see it. And it's a beautiful spot. Like the Okanagan Valley is a beautiful spot. It's got lots of wineries. It's got
Mhm,
a beautiful lake. Waterfront properties and marinas. Like it's an ideal place for, I guess, something kind of like this to exist. Really, in terms of tourism value
mhm,
to it. And if you
mhm.
talk about, because I messaged like Tourism Kelowna, they're one of the first people I messaged, and they said they didn't want to speak about it, but they directed me to West Bank First Nations, because they said it's really their thing,
Oh,
for lack of a better word, which I thought was pretty good to
that's
acknowledge.
great. Oh, I think it's
Um,
wonderful.
yeah, and then so I was able to connect with Coralie Miller of West Bank First Nations. Of course, she was interviewed in the documentary as well. But that's where I learned that like Ogopogo and Snaha are two completely different things. Ogopogo isn't even a real word. That's one of the most important things to point out. It was created for a dance hall song, the Funny Foxtrot.
Yes.
Um, and because it references a creature in the water, people just associated what people were seeing with this word Ogopogo. And that's where that
Mm.
came from. And in fact, the community of Vernon owned the copyright to the name Ogopogo until like 2 years ago, where they
Mm.
graciously, quote unquote, gave it back to the West Bank First Nations, who really weren't interested in the word at all, because
It's the thought that
that's not the
counts.
water spirit.
Right. Right. Oh my god. Well, I just love the whole allure of it. I mind you, I love it because it's also so Canadian. And,
Yes.
we have some great stuff up here, and, we seem to just take a back seat to some of, these things like Loch Ness, because people, I love Scotland, don't get me wrong. I love Scotland. I've got a lot of friends in Scotland. I've got family in the UK. I love I love folklore anywhere in the world that I go. But honestly, here in Canada, there's just so much here. And there's just not enough about it. I love, Canadian content. When you wrote this book, I was like, yeah, here we go. So I want in on this. So why don't we start then? What exactly is Ogopogo, and what really makes it stand apart from your traditional, sea monster sort of
Well,
allure?
you could look at it in one of two ways. Either it is a flesh and blood
Mhm,
cryptid creature,
mhm,
a part of a very rare species, which is interesting because the description of Ogopogo with the long serpent-like body, the horse kind of like a head or a dragon with the horns sticking out,
mhm.
um, is actually, when you look at what most lake monsters are traditionally described as, that is what they are described as. Same with the Cadborosaurus off the coast of British
Oh,
Columbia in the
catty,
ocean.
catty, yeah,
Yeah, catty.
catty.
And actually, even earlier reports of Loch Ness Monster also fit this same description. The whole plesiosaur thing came about because of the surgeon's photo, which was been proven to be a hoax, but people always associate it with like being a plesiosaur, which it's not.
So it's
Like,
basically a stereotype. You know what that feels like.
right?
Yep. So
So
poor Nessie.
yeah, I know.
Right.
You kind of feel bad for Nessie because it's,
I
it
know.
looks like it's been overshadowed by something that's just is, yeah, no, it was fake. And but everyone thinks a lake monster's a plesiosaur now, which is BS.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
it really is. So it could be this rare species that, if you look at a lot of lakes that have monsters, they all kind of exist within roughly the same geographical area, within a few degrees of each other. They're also very similar lakes, like
Mm,
striglacial lakes with salmonoid fish in it that could be good food source.
mhm,
Um, Lake Okanagan is roughly connected to the Pacific Ocean through like the Columbia River and a number of water channels. And if you also believe what the indigenous say, is that all the lakes kind of in the province are connected with tunnels,
wow,
um, and that this
that's crazy.
species could move from lake to lake. So if it is a flesh and blood creature and there's limited numbers of them, it would make sense you wouldn't see a lot of them because they're not just staying in Lake Okanagan.
Mhm.
They're moving back and forth to the Pacific Ocean. I know there's a lake, Shuswap Lake, about an hour and a half northeast of Kelowna, which has a monster called Shuswagi,
Mhm.
that kind of thing, and which also looks very similar. So it could just be this very rare aquatic species that we have yet to identify. And I know Ken Gerhard figures it'd have to be amphibian,
Oh, yeah.
because these lakes are cold, so it couldn't be a
Mhm.
reptile, and it couldn't be
Mhm.
like a mammal because it would have to surface for air.
Mhm.
I think he called it like I'm going to butcher this one, Archaeosaur or something like that. That
Yeah.
looked kind of was very almost like a kind of crocodilian sort of mammalia, sort of
Yes, yes.
species.
That's kinda crazy, but you look at his little legs and stuff, that would fit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it kind of would, right? So
Mhm.
that's one theory out there. The other one, which I didn't think about and really learn anything about until I started researching the book, is that to the indigenous tribe, this is a water spirit
Yes.
that
Yes.
occasionally chooses to show itself in a physical form, but otherwise it is very much the lake itself, and it is something that they revere and respect.
Mhm.
They give offerings to, which of course the European settlers mistook as like, they're making like these sacrifices
Yeah.
to to appease the water demon that would then, if they didn't do it right, it would come up and eat them. This was
Yeah.
cemented by the story of John McDougall, who
Mhm.
crossed the lake with his horses, did not pay his respects, and then something started pulling his horses under the water, and he was forced to cut the ropes lest his canoe get sucked on or boat get sucked under the water
And
as
he
well.
had traveled this route before, according to Cursed Waters. He had
Yeah.
traveled this route before with his horses, so felt very confident in doing so. Maybe he just got a little too big for his britches and,
Well, that's what Corley Miller says, and apparently
oh.
he was quite a player among among Indigenous
Yeah, I
women,
caught that one loud and clear. It's like,
so it could have been a
"Okay."
bit of payback as well.
Yeah.
If indeed it even happened, like, it's one of those stories that's
Yes.
become kind of part of the folklore and part of the legend of
Mhm,
Ogopogo. It's a lake, though it could have been water current pulling horses down, you know what I mean? There's so many
mhm,
different things, but it has been
mhm.
accredited to Ntsnaha
Right.
Um,
And it's
so
very deep, the lake. It could feasibly like, parts of it are up to, like, 2,500 feet deep, so it could feasibly survive.
Oh, for sure, and like, I think it's like several hundred down to silt, and then it goes even further down than that to the bottom. Some people claim the lake could even be bottomless. It's very long, it's very narrow, it's a huge lake, so there's
Mm,
lots of places to hide, and again, there are the tunnels, which, Bill Stesiak, who we interviewed for the documentary and book, he's like the legend hunter. He's been an Ogopogo researcher,
mm,
for decades. He owns,
mhm,
Ogopogo Quest, website where he gathers sightings. He was involved in 2 expeditions,
mm.
um, and in one of them, they did find these tunnels beneath Rattlesnake Island, which is the area where
Wow.
Ogopogo is supposed to live, and there's water pressure coming back out of those tunnels. So,
Wow.
yeah,
That's impressive. That's impressive. So, where are there tunnels or caverns,
yeah,
cave
something could also
systems?
live and exist in there, right? So,
Mhm.
but yeah, to me, it's fascinating. It's just the fact there's these 2 sides of it, right? Like the
Mhm,
very much, you could say, modern, materialistic, kinda capitalistic side to
mhm,
things, and there's this spiritual component to it,
mhm,
where if you do see it, like, just be thankful that you saw this very rare
mhm,
spirit that occasionally shows itself. It's very much the lake itself, and its health is tied to the lake itself, so there's very much an environmental slant to, you
mhm.
know, not
Yeah.
polluting the lake, respecting it. So this is a story that has so many different layers to it.
Well, I laugh because, she's talking about, we'd go water skiing and while you're waiting for the boat to come back and get you, you're just hoping that you're not gonna get company sort of thing. But I love it. But I also love how she mentions that there's a belief that it could be a shapeshifter
Yeah.
as well. I thought that was very interesting. I love the oral history of the indigenous people because it's just something that, you know, like, it stays with you and it's accurate because you have to remember it.
Yes.
Every
Yeah, it's not written
generation.
down anywhere. It's been
No.
told, and, and they have the carvings and such
Mhm,
to it. Um, but yeah, it's just it's a real to me, that part, it just took me completely by surprise. Like, and I should have known that,
it's gonna be deep,
that
yes.
yeah, that it's deep. And I mean, of course, people will say that, well, the indigenous people attach spirituality to every animal, so that's just them attaching. And that's an
Mhm,
argument John Kirk makes, who's a cryptozoologist up here in British Columbia, that
mhm,
but he also said that supports that it is this a real legitimate being as well, because they wouldn't just attach a spiritual meaning to something that didn't exist. So to them,
It's
even
true.
if it's a flesh and blood creature, it's been something
Mm,
that they've seen forever.
mm, mhm. That's true. That's true. Well, I mean, there's a lot of sightings. Why don't we talk about, I mean, some of the very first sightings, and then maybe that we can work our way over to the Folden tape.
Sure. Sure. Well, I
Is that
know Susan Allison is the
yes.
first of the settlers that saw it.
Mhm.
And it's cool. Her cabin, where she apparently saw it from, is still at Quails Gate Winery,
Wow.
which is a very good winery. If you like,
At
if
the
you
winery,
want
yes. We see
wine,
lots
it's
of stuff
very good.
after that, yeah.
Yeah. But she
Right.
writes in her journal, and it's documented historically, that she saw what she called like a dinosaur in the lake. There's a bit of speculation. It might have been her husband that saw it, and she was just writing it down, but it's
Mhm,
attributed to her. And
mhm.
of course, that's what prompted her to go start talking to the indigenous people. And when they explained what it was, she just took the Nsnahiitku and kind of turned it to Nahahaktak or something like that.
You're
Because she
close.
couldn't
You
get the
gotta
word.
give her something credit for the effort.
That was pretty good. That was
Yeah,
pretty good.
yeah.
But she's one of the first
Mhm.
of the settlers. And then, of course, the John McDougall, I think it happened earlier than that, but he was Métis, so he was sort of also half indigenous, half
Yes,
European.
yes.
Um, but the sightings persisted to the point where when they did create, like, they did start having ferries that would travel, the ferries would have people armed with guns on the ferries, that if this thing
Wow.
did come up, they could start shooting at it. And more
Imagine.
sightings persisted just from that through
Mhm,
time, and it just kind of that eventually slowly moved into the
mhm.
modern settings. It started with, I think, Holden film. I'm gonna gap on the date. It was in the 60s, I believe.
68 is what I
68, yeah.
yes,
Thank you.
as per your book.
Thank you, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I read it.
And you
Yes,
took notes, which is fantastic
you
because it's been,
know it.
a year and a half ago, I could have quoted it off the top of my head, but other things
Year and a
in the
half
movie.
ago, my memory would have been better too, Jason, so you're in good company. So so that's a long time ago, and what I like about it is that it's film and you can't fudge it.
Especially back then.
Yes.
There was no way to fudge it. So he saw something. Folden was driving along Highway 97 from Kelowna down south towards Penticton, which is
Mhm,
a community at the southern end of Okanagan Lake.
mhm,
And obviously he saw something big enough in the water, because he's way back. Like that road is way, way back,
mhm.
that it caught his attention. So that speaks to the size of it. And it
Yes.
prompted him to pull over, pull out his camera, and start shooting footage. And every time that it would drop beneath the water, he'd stop. And then when it would surface, he'd shoot again. So you get a really good, 35 seconds or more worth of footage of something that people estimate could have been 40 to 60 feet long,
Wow.
swimming through the water, like undulating through the water.
Mhm,
And then before finally just sinking below the surface.
mhm.
Um, and
It was
it's in the
incredible
documentary, and you
footage.
can find it on YouTube as well. There's like, less good versions of it on YouTube, but you can see it, and it's compelling. And I mean, that's how we don't get a lot of footage like that when it comes to like any kind of cryptid, really, right?
Mhm.
And
It's
that's a
true.
hard thing to dispute, because it's not some guys, in a
Mhm.
Ogopogo costume swimming through the water or anything like that, or
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
computer generated. There's not didn't exist back then.
That's
Um,
exactly it now. I mean, now we're really in trouble because we've got AI. So, I mean, who the heck knows what's going to start surfacing?
well, literally, right? Like it is a problem, and I think it's going to make legitimate research really, really difficult. And when you do get a valuable piece of, say, video evidence or photographic evidence, people aren't going to believe you anyways,
Mhm.
because you just use AI to create that, and that's really unfortunate.
It's interesting to me because there's so many naysayers on many different levels, and when you have people who have obviously faith in the creator, you don't need to see the creator. You'll never see the creator, chances are, but we feel it, right? It's like
Yes,
within people. You don't need to be convinced of it. It's intertwined into your fiber. Even though chances are you are never going to see your creator until you get there, over the bridge, over the rainbow bridge, you know. But it's so difficult to think that why is it so hard, do you think, for people to grasp the fact that we live with other really incredible beings? If you're thinking on the level of creation, okay, like I'm not a religious person, but I'm reasonable, and then if you're gonna create humanity, you're gonna create all of this. Chances are you're gonna create some pretty wondrous things. Why is it so hard, do you think, to just look at something like this and go, "Wow, that's crazy. It's incredible." It's like,
I
nope,
think, I mean, it's kind of twofold. I think there was a time because people have been documenting this kind of stuff for like forever,
long
right?
time.
The
Yes,
Bible's got UFOs in it.
you bet.
You know what I mean? Like
Yes,
it does, and they
yes,
were seen in medieval times, and people have
yes,
been seeing monsters forever. I think as we've become more, and I'll say quote unquote civilized, um,
yes.
you you just start letting go of that. I think there was a time like when Colin Wilson wrote a book. I'm sure I've talked about this before called oh gosh, I'm gonna gap completely on the occult. It's literally called the occult.
Yes.
And he called it Faculty X. And so when we were not living in gathered communities and we were relying more on the land and on our instincts, we could
Mm,
tap into that and we would see these things, we would understand it, we would accept it. People were communing more with spirits.
mhm,
Um, and then as we became more industrialized and it became more about like making money and
mm,
producing things, it got schooled out of us and churched out of us. And then science didn't want to pay attention to it because you can't quantify it in
mhm,
a lab. And I think that's what happened. So now when people see these things, they're either afraid to talk about it because they're going to get ridiculed, because that's what would happen forever. It's only really, if you think about it, in the last like 10 to 15 years, this has become really an open conversation where shows like
mhm,
this exist beyond it, like Coast to Coast AM.
mhm.
You know what I mean? So you get ridiculed by it, and then other people would just like almost dismiss it. They just like, nope, I didn't see it. Or they
Yeah.
try to explain it away, because I think if you accept that you saw something that you can't readily explain, it changes the whole way you view the world, and that really freaks people out.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong
I
with
think
that.
that's why, and I think now that we've sort of had more of a spiritual awakening in the last few years, especially since the pandemic,
Yes.
people are looking for more meaning in their lives, I think it's becoming
Mhm.
more acceptable.
Well, plus I think you just had a lot of time to think about it when everybody was home for all this time. I
Yeah.
know that, when my producer and I did a show during that time, we just created a show and did it because we took like the worst time of the week, dinner time on a Saturday. We'd watch it, right? And it actually it went crazy. And all I did, I spent about 25 hours a week of research, but I made a specific point because there were no libraries to go to, or, everything was online. All sources were given. So people could, if they really liked it, they could go online and just dig and find more on their own. That show did so bloody well. We were just like, what just happened? Like, where did this come from? But people were opened right up to the possibility of many things. Like, it covered many, many, many different things. And I realized at that point, I'm like, you know what? If people just had the time to slow down and not be rush, 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 just trying to exist through life, they could probably be more open to things like that. I see there's that willingness, but I liked the whole, like, the fold in video for me was that was really compelling because
Very compelling.
you can't fudge it.
No, you can't fudge it. There's another video in there, the gentleman who was water skiing, and there's the 3 other objects in the water, the 3 other
Yeah.
animals that were small, and he came along and literally fell in, right next to them. That's
Yeah,
an amazing video footage too. I can't remember the name of the gentleman that shot it.
yeah.
I don't think they ever found the water skier. Like they found the water. He didn't get eaten,
I was
but they
like,
never. No
"Oh
one was
my
able to track
god."
the water skier down afterwards. Let me be specific here.
Right,
There's
right.
actually been no, despite
Yes,
its lake demon status, there's been
yes.
no Ogopogo attacks on people. The closest they can attribute is the McDougal incident, if that's even true.
With yeah.
But that was a very compelling footage too, because it's just people filming a person water skiing, and they came around a corner, and there's these 3 animals in the water that they can't identify, and the guy goes right by it and falls in. And that's what leads Ogopogo to be so well documented. There's been sightings where 15 people have seen it at the same time
Right.
in one
Which is
case.
which is amazing.
Yeah,
When and where, does it tend to show up the most?
sort of all over the lake.
Okay.
That's what's interesting. I mean, obviously, the bulk of the sightings are around Rattlesnake Island, which is towards Penticton at the southern end, because that is traditionally where it's supposed to live,
Yes.
according to the indigenous folklore, which I think is really cool. And I mean, and we went there.
Yes.
I was able to go there, which was I thought was really neat with Bill Stesiuk and see it.
Yes.
And I was someone like before writing the book, and I mentioned it, I think, in the opening. I was not really open to the idea of lake monsters. Like I was like, it's a lake, it's a limited body of water. Where could it exist?
Yes.
Blah blah blah. But as soon as you go on the water,
Yeah.
you change your perception. Because we were right at Rattlesnake Island, maybe like 20 feet from it, and the water in that area, and at Squally Point just drops completely off. Like there's like very little beach. It just like shoom, and you're in
Hmm.
250 feet of water after like 3 steps.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Well, at
Something
least
could have been down there when we were there. Like
it could have.
it could have.
It could. Yeah, good thing you didn't fall in. So
I was tempted to. I wanted to jump in and swim to Rattlesnake Island, but it didn't happen. I was
I
really
didn't know
disappointed.
they would let you. Can you imagine? Oh my gosh. See that I know it's very cool. You mentioned in the video that the sighting when you're going back to I don't like to say infamous by any means, but there was a photo taken that has really had they've just torn it to bits, right? It's just craziness because they are, and again, the name eludes me.
Well, that
And
was
it's
with Dale, the one that was Dale and Colleen took in
Dale,
October of
yes,
2022. Yeah.
yes, that, oh my God, that has taken some real hits. And I don't know, it looks pretty compelling.
Well, and that's the thing. And this kind of goes back to what we were just talking about, where it's like someone presents something that is an incredible photo.
Mhm,
And Dale and Colleen, they didn't, having met them, and we went out on the boat with them to where
mhm,
they had their sighting.
mhm,
They were never interested in making a buck. They never have made a buck, like, off
right.
of it. You know what I mean? We
No,
used it with their permission. They didn't ask for
yeah,
money.
no.
Um, they're the last people that were really even interested in having a sighting or anything like that. They thought it was a deadhead in the water, which of course would be an
Mm,
upside down tree floating. So they went back and they noticed that wasn't a deadhead, and Colleen shot the photo. But once you present that and it's in the news, well, people just automatically want to crap all over it, because there's no way that someone could have taken a picture, especially like people that weren't even really interested in the story.
mhm,
Like there's people that have been like diehard Ogopogo researchers for decades that have never
mhm.
got a compelling photograph, but these people just snap a picture. And I think that creates
I'm
just a
gonna put the
real
picture up.
nasty streak in people. You know what I mean?
It does. I'm gonna put it up. I'm just gonna
Yeah.
put up like a Google search picture on it so people could just look at the different ones. But this is the one here that's I mean, it is compelling when you
Well, it
look at this
is.
thing. You know, I'm trying to
It's
get a
and it's
bigger
about
picture.
they said it was about 3 feet across the head, if it
Hold
was the
on.
head. But you can see, like,
Yeah.
when you look at the statue, it's got like the little horns, which that's part of the Ogopogo statue, and we've got it on the cover of the book.
Yes.
It looks like a face with eyes.
Yeah,
So it's
there it
got that
is.
kind of horseish, dragonish head to it.
It does. And who actually said that when they're looking at it, that it looked more like a, um, what the heck was it? Was it
Oh,
a
a
crab?
crawfish.
Crawfish.
That's John Kirk. And there's no way that that's a
Yeah.
crawfish. Like,
I
crawfish don't look like that.
I
And
mean,
they're
yeah,
not 3 feet across either. Like, no
I sh
disrespect to Mr. Kirk, but I don't think so. Like, it just, Eli and
it
I,
doesn't look like a
no,
floating crawfish, no.
we're convinced. The same with, I think it was Carrick St. John, who's another cryptozoologist, looked at it, and feels it's compelling because he pointed out that you can see what looks like a neck, a long serpentine neck going
Ye
below it
and
into
you
the
could
water.
see the white, a little bit
Yeah,
of a um,
lighter color.
lighter color right underneath it,
And
and
it
I
wasn't
have to
moving,
s
it wasn't bobbing up and down. And
no,
we saw
and
driftwood out in the water the day we were there, and it's all bobbing up and down, right? Like,
yes. Yes, exactly, and I just looked at it and kinda went, "Oh my god," but it reminded me I'm gonna put this up just because I want to people to see, the little horse thing, the little horns. There.
yeah.
It's a bit white here. I mean, it looks a little bit different, obviously,
Oh, for sure.
but I mean, I like that, this seems to be quite normal
Yeah,
with a lot of them that are seen.
yeah, the Cadborosaurus,
Mhm.
Champ, in Lake Champlain, they're all
Yeah.
described being very, very, very similar in
Yes.
appearance.
Yes.
And whoever made that statue, that's pointed out too, I think it was Dale who actually pointed that out, that when you look at the statue in the park, that's what it looks like. And we even in the film Buddha, we have this picture of the statue and we put up Dale and Colleen's picture next to it. It's
Mhm.
pretty darn close.
Yeah, but, there's too many that's what I'm saying, it's just always so easy for the naysayers to come up and say, "Absolutely not," because you're fairly skeptical. I mean,
Yeah.
you're a logical guy.
Yeah, no, I'm one of those like, well, the show we had, I want to believe in this stuff, but I'm not going to believe it on blind faith. Like you really have to
Yes,
look at it critically.
yes.
And that picture to me is very credible,
Mhm.
especially having
Right.
met them, having been out in the spot where they took the picture. Like it just, I find it, I'm inclined to believe they got a picture of Ogopogo or
Mhm.
Nslahayitku, however you want to refer to it, right?
Mhm. No, it's true. Well, when when I saw you say, "Yes, I think this is compelling," I'm like, "Okay, now I know we're onto something." Because if you think it's something, then we know it's something.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah, no, I'm so is Eli Watson, who I made
yeah.
the film with and who directed it. Like he's convinced too. Like they got a credible picture of Ogopogo.
Like,
Um,
you have to think I guess I can understand in a way why people would be a little bit skeptical because this thing sat there almost like posing, and when they came back around, it was still there, just with his head towards the surface, and
yeah,
she
looking
just
at them.
like, that's almost unheard of
Well, and there's some good
because it's
theories behind
sleeping?
that. Like
Yeah,
it's
just
October. There's no
okay,
other real boats on the water.
okay,
They were Dale and Colleen were in a sailboat without the engine running, so they're running on sail power, so it was making no noise. It
right,
was at the peak of the salmon run, which happens every year, so there would have been a lot of food. So it's probably a good time if you are a creature, you
mhm,
would feel relatively safe coming up to feed. Then you see these people, and you just cut. They don't, but they're not really appearing threatening. So maybe you're just taking a look.
maybe
I
it was
think
full of
maybe
salmon and it was just napping.
yeah, it could have been or sunning
After a
itself
good
because it was
meal.
in the sun. There's at least the wall. Like
Yes,
you don't know,
yeah,
right? And that's
yeah,
so it's sure it's one of those I think one in a bazillion shot chances of seeing it.
you
I'm sure if
know it.
people were on the lake more at night with flashlights, they might have a better chance of seeing something. Everyone seems to look at in the daytime,
Mhm,
but in the daytime in the summer, there's water
mhm,
skiers and jet skis and all sorts of stuff, and it's
everything.
chaos, right? Like
Mhm,
we were there in May doing
mhm.
filming, and it was very busy on the lake. So something
Wow.
if it's noisy, it's not going to be hanging out during the daytime on the water on the surface. But
Mhm,
in October, like late October,
mhm.
sunny day, no one really out, there's a greater chance of something showing up.
It was just like a perfect event.
Yeah,
Wow, I love that. Oh, I have a question, which is was gonna lead to a series of my questions, so I'll just put it up here. Hi, Mart. Do you know if anyone has ever run sonar
yeah.
to look
When
for
they did the two expeditions that Bill Stesiak were on, they ran sonar and side scan sonar, and they had
Mhm,
underwater submersibles and everything and scuba divers down. So they did a very
mhm,
thorough search. And that's how they were able to determine where the caves were. And they
mhm,
did have something. They picked up a sonar ping of something large in the lake, and that stirred up silt at the bottom. So
mm, right.
yeah, but they don't know
Okay.
what it was,
Of
kind of
course
thing.
not.
They got a
No.
compelling sonar ping, which I
Yeah.
think is really interesting.
I think it's interesting. Has anyone tried to and this is just, the probably leaning a little bit on, paranormal research sort of thing, because I think people should try to do audio recordings of absolutely everything when you're
Mhm.
out. But has anyone ever tried to do audio? Even can't you do that underwater? Isn't that our equipment that will pick up
Microphones. I
on
know
sound?
they've done that on Loch Ness for sure, and I believe
Yeah.
during those expeditions they would have. There was a Japanese one on the lake, and I believe they did put audio
Mhm.
equipment into the water. The one thing they haven't done, which I think would be great, is remember when that one gentleman did the eDNA test of Loch Ness?
Yes.
They should
Yes.
do. I find it interesting what they'd get if they did that in Lake Okanagan.
Yes. I mean, funding. Has anybody ever tried to get funding to do something like that? Because if there's so many sightings and I find the picture to be compelling, I think the video is very compelling. Um, I mean, why could you not get testing for something like that? I mean, people have
Well,
gotten money to test for less, you know?
yeah, I think that's a really good question. Someone should, I don't know how you apply for a grant to do that or how you'd find the right people, but I think
Yeah.
that's gonna be a really good test to do. It would be kind of a
Mhm.
it'd be a great step forward.
Would make for a great television series.
It would, wouldn't it? Actually, we should get on this, Michelle.
I know. I know. It would. I do. I absolutely think it would make for a great television series. And then you're looking at, the production company to pick up the tab on
Exactly.
some of that. So, hmm, wheels are
Hmm.
turning. But
Netflix.
yeah, it's like, I think it would be great. I think DNA testing is amazing. I think looking and exploring these tunnels.
Yeah, actually being able to get down,
Mhm,
and make that a big focus. Do you know what I mean? So that P send because especially now, like I know the ones that Stasiak did, they were like like late 90s, early 2000s. So the technology's improved that you could send little like underwater drones in, right? Not fear
mhm.
of getting a diver stuck in there and killing someone.
Yeah, I
You
don't
could
wanna do
totally
that.
do that and see just how far they actually go, right? Like,
Mhm. Well, I mean, if it opens up into something
yeah,
huge somewhere, under the island and somewhere, it would be interesting because at least you know where it would spend time. And do you know if there's more than one there? When these water skiers saw 3,
three, yeah, and
um
there's been several sightings of like more than one and smaller ones and
oh,
larger ones. So there's definitely a population. I think that's the only way you could describe it. You couldn't say how
yeah,
many, but there's a population of these creatures out there.
that's so fascinating to me just to think that you're sharing space with something so magnificent, and
Yeah,
and
John
nobody
Kirk makes that point.
nobody wants to research. It's like going out and looking for freaking King Kong, you know what I mean? Like,
It's
you
like, why
just
wouldn't you want
are
to?
right there. I know, I know. Why would you not want to? It just seems like you've got this fairly docile, there haven't been reports of any attacks per se.
Mhm.
It seems very, very docile, and the indigenous seem to think it's very, very docile, or at least unbothered.
Yeah,
But Wayne makes actually a really good comment. He says, keep in mind that animals that have no history of human violence towards them, they have an inherent curiosity regarding humans, especially if it's in a quiet settings. Example, penguins of Antarctica.
for sure, and that would explain the Dale and Colleen's incident. The
Yeah.
if what they saw was curious about them as they as Dale and Colleen was curious about what they were seeing in the water, right? Like, it's just one
Mhm.
of those things. If you're not I mean, if they had seen it and thrown something at it or tried to hit it with a paddle, that could have gone very different. You know what I mean? Maybe.
Oh,
So,
yeah. What is it? Let's poke it and see what it
yeah, that would be
does.
smart. Like, like
It might make for some good footage, but
yeah.
you know,
No, thank
yeah.
you.
Interesting. So Kathy says, after we mentioned the TV series, don't ask the Smithsonian. No, no, we don't want the Smithsonian hand in anything. They're
Not at all.
terrible.
No, thank you.
Oh, they're terrible. It makes me realize, I mean, this is a pretty sacred place.
Yeah.
This whole area is considered to be a very sacred place. Are there other sorts of activity there? Like you mentioned Bigfoot, you mentioned, like paranormal stuff. I mean, they all seem to go hand in hand. All of it, UFO activity, all of it. Everything goes full circle. Do you have reports of any of that in that area?
Like, not extreme. I mean, because we investigate, our team, Canadian Paranormal Society, investigate all over the interior. So we've done investigations in, like, Vernon. We were just there last night.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, there's nothing out I hate to say out of the ordinary. Like, you
Right.
know what I mean? Like, it's not like Skinwalker
Technically,
Ranch
yeah.
or anything like that. I mean,
Highly
there's
strange.
reports
Yeah.
of hauntings at various locations in the
Mm.
in the region. Sasquatch, this whole interior is Sasquatch country, and people do see UFOs, right? So there's nothing. I wouldn't call it like, yeah, it's nothing out of the ordinary. I think like Ogopogo and Snahiku would be the big thing
The
for the
big
region, but
thing.
there's all sorts of activity all over the place, right? It's called
Mhm.
Supernatural British Columbia for a reason.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is
Yeah.
indeed. I mention it because I tend to, well, before I mention this, I'll back up a moment yet again. How does, um, the other life What kind of other fish or such aside from salmon are found or wildlife found primarily in and around the water? Like, how do you think there's a reaction from them when Ogopogo's around?
That's a really good question. I don't know if anyone's really heavily looked into that. Like, you know
Right.
what I mean? I know that
Yeah.
it's a lake. It seems to be stocked as any lake would
Sure.
be. The salmon is the primary um,
Food
fish.
source.
People seem to say
Yeah.
that there's sturgeon in there, but other people say there's no sturgeon in Lake Okanagan, right?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, there's
Mm.
been no, and it doesn't seem to be any great. Like whenever people see Ogopogo, it's not like suddenly there's like the birds go flying, taking off, and
No,
fish don't seem
no,
walking on
no.
the surface or anything like that.
Mm.
The
Yeah.
closest would be some of John Kirk's sightings where he said what it looked like when it would go under, there'd be like almost like an oily residue left on the surface. And they
Mm.
did find what looked like chewed up bits of fish and shrimp, almost like
Yes.
it was regurgitated out, but no actual sign of Ogopogo at that
Mm.
time. But they speculated that maybe that was the
Yes.
it had ate and that's what it just left behind.
I kind of wonder because sturgeon tend to be huge.
Sturgeon can be very big. I mean, and
Yeah,
if
are we looking
you
at
could easily mistake
Paradoria?
them for a prehistoric monster. Like,
Yes, yes,
yeah,
yes. Well, it's funny, my grandparents had an island on a place up in Northern Ontario, on a lake called Wanapitei. Jacques Cousteau, actually. I remember stories of the locals there talking about how he came up to research it because they believed some parts of it were bottomless, and they had a tale of, an aquatic being that they called a monster.
okay.
And my grandfather, being an World War II veteran, "Ah, go get this thing." It's like, "Okay, grandpa, calm down." You know? So, and and honestly, he had fishing reels. I already thought this was me a thing, but the reels on these things were like cable, were this big on a
Wow.
handheld rod. I'm like, "You are going over, man." Like, this thing gets a hold of you. And it just for years and years, the local talked about something there in Cousteau went out there and they tried to map the bottom of the water, and there were sections of it that were, bottomless, and they had all these undertows. And we thought, oh God, it's a big sturgeon or something, And one time, something came up beside his little boat, and you could see it had been clipped by motors and things like that. And he goes, it was massive. This thing had to have been probably 20 feet long, and I'm thinking, like he just gauging the size of his boat,
Yeah.
which was like probably like 13, 14 foot. So he goes, it was considerably longer than that. So I don't know, do sturgeons even get that big? Because this thing's 40 feet, you're talking.
I don't think they get that big. Like, that's the thing. I mean,
Mm.
a sturgeon could be 10 feet long, maybe a
I
little
see.
long. It's still big. I mean, it's
It's
big,
this big. It could do some
but
major
not 40
damage.
feet long. Not 40
No.
feet long,
Well,
and
20
even
is
20, I
is
think would be stretching it.
yeah. And one day this thing just ceased to be. That was it. It was just it, and people just stopped seeing it, stopped talking about it. So it's interesting to me. But there was also, again, why I mention it is because there was tons of UFO activity up there. And, it just seems to go hand in hand with these, you don't know. Is it flesh and blood, or is it like the indigenous say? No, it's a spirit. Is it dimensional, interdimensional, multidimensional, multiverse? Like, who the heck knows? What are they really? But I always found that fascinating. So
That is really interesting, especially because it stopped.
yeah,
Like,
it
it
did.
just stopped. People stopped seeing it, and then they stopped talking about it, right? Like,
Yes, yes, and this seems to have been going on with Ogopogo for obviously like well over 150 years. It's still,
well, it's in the
it's just,
thousands, right? It goes back thousands of years, and people are
yes,
still having sightings. There's a couple sightings even last year. So,
wow,
yeah.
wow,
I don't think it's going away anytime soon. It happens in peaks, you know what I mean? There's some years people see it more and
mm,
others less, which could speak to the fact that it's not always around. You know what I mean? It could be
yes,
moved on to another lake or back out to the ocean or who
mhm,
knows?
mhm. Have you mentioned Carl Sagan, and I find him I find him extremely interesting. I've always found his work to be very interesting. Have you ever heard of the Order of the Dolphin?
I have not actually.
Carl Sagan and a bunch of other scientists created this group, and they say this was the birth of SETI.
Okay.
This was the onset of SETI because they believed that dolphins. So again, I just want to bring the attention to the aquatic side of things and the intelligence that they were able to communicate with UFOs and extraterrestrials and so on.
With dolphins.
Yep, dolphins. And if you get into some UFO sightings, there have been people who have said that, as the craft has come down, that dolphins would come up underneath it and swim in circles right underneath it.
Interesting.
It kind of reminded me of Star Trek with humpback whales.
Oh, it's with the whales and the
yeah, right. So it's like, oh, I'm having a flashback, but
it's like 1986 again.
I know. It's like, gosh, could it be? But because they're so sensitive, I think, to frequencies, and they have their own language and they can communicate. I tend to wonder if that's why maybe some of this activity that comes in. If you've got this incredible creature, this being, if it comes through and communicates, I wonder with other, beings of high strangeness.
It
Like
would be
Cocoon.
interesting, right?
Yes, that's right.
Like the movie Cocoon.
Yeah. Well, it's Star Trek. I mean, to me, some of like these creatures or our wildlife tends to be very sensitive to things like that.
Well, even like domestic animals, cats,
Yes.
dogs, they pick up on things that we can't see, right? So,
Mhm.
and I know that there is a growing movement, and I'm glad that people are talking about it more when it comes to, let's say, more with Sasquatch, that other
Yes.
phenomenon occurring at the same time.
Mhm.
People even having kind of weird paranormal encounters with Sasquatch, right? There's people who say they've been abducted by aliens and they're on the spaceship and they see Sasquatch on the spaceship.
I've heard
Um,
that.
which
Yeah.
is like, that's pretty out there, but people are saying that, right?
Yes.
So I'm a big believer that this phenomena is interrelated. I know that kind of
Mhm.
makes me unpopular amongst cryptozoology people, but I'm not a
Yeah.
cryptozoologist, so I
Right.
don't care.
We're
So,
just gonna lean on the quantum side of things for a
yeah,
moment.
and I think
Yeah.
it's something we
Yeah.
need to look at because I think
Yeah.
that's where we're gonna have the best shot at finding answers to all this stuff. When you look at
Mhm.
multiverse theory and that
Well,
kind of,
John
and
Keel
quantum
was
physics, I
onto
think it's all
something.
related to that
Yeah.
somehow. I don't know how.
Mhm.
John Keel's work really
That's
touched a
right.
lot on all that, and I think that to me makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I mean, let's face it, there's everything is connected. Everything's vibration, frequency. I think beings that can communicate this way and telepathically, there's definitely something to it. But I mean, you have those who are the primatologists who are just like, no, this is definitely from here. This is the way it is. Well, apparently reptilians are from here too, living underground. Can we talk about that? So just saying, just go talk to the Hopi. They'll give you all kinds of stories of crazy things living underground. There are things like we're not the first kick at the can here.
No, no, we're not. I
Yeah.
think that's why people are resistant to that concept as well, because it just changes the whole perception of what life on Earth is
Mhm.
and how it works, right? And I think that's kind of what we were talking about earlier. It freaks
Yes.
people out.
Yes.
Um, because it's very easy right now. We like our little boxes that we can kind of put things in that make all logical sense. And
Yes.
so right now we've created a very orderly way of seeing the world,
That's right.
and how it works.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
So forget it. We're not going to play around with that at all. I think that's where people get turned off. It's
Yeah.
funny how the people who seem most skeptical about things like Ogopogo
Mhm.
and whatnot are people who have never had an experience.
Yeah.
Or same with like ghosts. Like it's like, ghosts aren't real. Like, but they haven't been somewhere where something paranormal has happened. Or if they have, they've just said, no, that didn't happen.
It's because it's all demons, Jason.
It's all
Don't get me started. But no,
yes.
no,
It's
but no,
all demons.
there are some faiths that believe strictly that,
Oh, completely right. And people, even the early settlers, called Ogopogo a lake demon. Like
right?
that's literally the phrase that they called it, a lake demon.
Yes. But I mean, I think you would associate serpents with that.
People have forever because of how
Yeah.
the projection of what Lucifer was in the Bible,
Exactly.
right? And
Yeah.
etc.
Exactly.
Um,
Meanwhile, they're these incredible beings of knowledge, messengers, and so on. If you delve into other ancient cultures and how they viewed, dragons or serpents, it's just more knowledge based. But
yeah.
You
Why
can't get,
isn't, you know?
like, it's conditioning sort
Yeah.
of keeps us on, you know. So now you got this big 40-footer just serpenting its way through the water. That's gonna freak some people out.
Oh, for sure. Especially because then I think that was kind of what I mean, there've been news stories about Ogopogo, you know what I mean? Like I was
Mm,
saying, and there was like the song, people are having sightings, but I think when that sort of started making rounds, that was like real photographic photo video evidence. Like you said, it's
mm,
mind blowing to see that
mhm,
because those just didn't exist back then.
mhm. No,
That kind of
100%.
footage, right? Like that'd be around the same time as the Patterson Gimlin was like late 60s as well, right?
Yes. Yes,
Which is a whole other
exactly.
topic.
It
Like we could get
it
into about
it
that,
it
but
is, but it's not far off. I mean, when you look into different parts of the world, like, let's look at Alaska. Again, not super far from where you are. You're
no,
kinda
not at
like
all, not at all.
right? And they've got their stories and lore about sea monsters there and Bigfoot, like Sasquatch, UFOs, bases, triangles. I mean, you notice, like, when you look at stuff like this, they have the full gambit of, like, everything.
Yeah.
It's craziness. It's like, how you guys luck out with everything.
I wonder too because those connections weren't made before. So do you think that that's
Yeah.
like people now just talking, like willing to kind of lump it all together
Mhm.
now,
I
whereas before they like to admit to seeing one thing was almost too much. You know what I mean? Like you talk about, I saw the Bigfoot, I saw the lake monster, or the UFO.
all came out of the triangle.
It all came out of the triangle, but I'm only going to mention one of them. You know what I
I
mean?
know.
So, but I'm willing to talk about all of it because
Yeah, and let's
Skinwalker
not
Ranch
forget the
is a TV show
pyramid
and
too.
popular now,
Yeah, the
right?
pyramid
Like,
over there or 2. So, I
yeah.
know. It's a full gambit of everything, but I think it's like anything, media has its place if it's done properly. People say yeah, people who just never leave their sofas, like, they don't have they don't all have the privilege or the finances just to go out and explore all these incredible places, and they do it, basically just through what they see. And when you can watch a podcast, like even right now, you have people just, here in the stream, just connecting with one another and sharing of the sharing of ideas, I think is wonderful. And somebody who may not think to maybe ask the right questions that might lead them down that different path of discovery. Maybe people who have seen, the documentary and read your book might saying, you know what, it's doable to go to Kelowna and have a
Mhm.
sighting and maybe check it out. If you're a little bit closer, I'd do it. It's
Oh
been
yeah,
years
no,
since I've been
it's
out west.
easy. I'd love to go back. Dave Schrader actually challenged me to go for a nighttime swim in Lake Okanagan to see if I see anything in the
I
lake.
say do it.
I'm just waiting for it to warm up, like, 'cause it's cold, like,
I
right
know.
now,
Maybe invite Dave Schrader to join you.
right?
So it's like, yeah. You know, I mean, safety in numbers, I say.
Oh, for sure, yeah, and I'd want someone else around for sure.
Well, somebody's gotta film it.
Yeah.
Oh, but I do think it's really wonderful. It makes you wonder how many other areas that, Canada's loaded. I mean, loaded with lakes. We have so many lakes and dense forests and incredible, incredible places. What else is hiding in there?
Yeah, and a lot of lakes in Canada have monster stories. They do. They actually they legitimately maybe not as well published as, like, say, Ogopogo or Champ or anything like that, but you hear
But these
stories
are
kind of
also tourist places, right?
yeah. Those yeah,
Yeah,
those are the tourist places, but there's
yeah.
little lakes where people maybe only have a handful of cabins where people have been seeing things,
Mhm.
for a very long time. Like the lake, the story that you were telling earlier, very similar to that, right?
Yeah, whole community. I mean, it's just a small community, in Northern Ontario. So it's not like a lot of people go there, but I mean, it's a big lake, a lot of properties up there, and that have been there forever. But back then, people would like my grandfather would take up there for like a month or two. Like my
Mhm.
grandmother home with 6 kids. Bye. you know, this is okay. Yeah. So,
And it
but
was, I guess.
I guess it was, yeah. So, but I mean, it wasn't uncommon to spend, all this time out in the water. The water sustained you back then, right? I mean,
Growing
I
up, I
mean,
was the
yeah,
same thing. We had a cabin at, like I said, at Shuswap Lake, and we'd be out there the whole summer because my
yeah.
mom was a school teacher, so we'd just go out, and my dad would commute back and forth.
Mhm.
And that's where I saw stuff out there, you know what I mean? Like, that
Yeah.
over all the years that were really interesting, and I was convinced that there was something in the lake too. but
So,
also speaking to what you're saying, a friend of mine was out same lake, like we'd go out there all the time, and I was me and a buddy were out there, and he said he saw lights come up out of the lake and
wow.
then just fly off. And I've seen like I would see like I guess you'd call them like orbs, but they weren't like orbs like what people
Yeah,
talk
yeah.
about, like balls of light moving around on the deck.
Yes.
There was like stuff going on in the woods, like
Mhm.
there was like it's a spot where like I think it's just water's like a conduit for this kind of stuff too.
Yeah.
There's that belief, right? And
Mhm.
it could be a crossover point. So why
Especially,
wouldn't you have a bunch
moving
of
water.
activity?
Well, it makes sense,
Yeah.
and do you notice how a lot of cryptids as well as, UFOs or UAPs have orb activity?
Mhm. And that
Let's
we're
not
not
talk
talking
we're
to
not talking
when
about
we say
paranormal
orbs, we're not
orbs.
talking to stuff in pictures that's usually
No,
discussed.
no,
We're
you
talking
see
like
these big
balls of
yeah.
light. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That seems to be a thing.
Yeah, it does. And it does, yeah, people have seen that around Sasquatch, they've seen it around
Yes.
UFOs.
Yes.
Um, Ronald Murphy wrote a really, really good book about like I think it's called Lights in the Forest or something. I can't remember, Phantom Lights or something like that.
Yes.
Like it's
Yeah.
yeah,
Yes. It's crazy. They just seem to have a life of their own in the way that they behave,
yeah. It's
It's
an
just
intelligence. It's behaving as with intelligence. That's
mm,
the thing that's interesting. And that's like with all this stuff,
mhm,
including Ogopogo, there's an intelligence behind it. Like for
mhm.
something just to sit in the water and watch someone in a sailboat, right? Like it's scrutinizing and it's paying attention and it's probably determining whether you're a threat or not and
Mhm.
what it
Well,
wants to do.
it's incredible to me that you have this immense, just amazing being. You have to look at it as anything other than being this incredible being just examining you and being so close to you with such a gentle approach. It
Mhm.
sure goes against the narratives of the ancient sea mariners, the
Oh, big
Kraken
time.
and just gonna wipe you out and, it really goes against that narrative of the old lores.
It all of them, like, if you look into the stories about, Cadborosaurus and
Mhm.
Champ and even Nessie, there's no real accounts of these things being aggressive towards people at all.
Mhm.
That's like some that horror movies wanna make it a big scary thing, you know what I mean? And things like that, but
Yeah, narrative
it's
again.
not. Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
None of
Yeah,
these things are. Even like, I mean, Sasquatch, you do have stories, like some really aggressive stories, which is that, we're not
yeah.
talking Sasquatch, but that's something
Well,
where
you
there
can talk
seems to
about
be
whatever
both.
you want, it's your show. So, I
You know what I
believe
mean, though? But
everything's connected, so, you know.
yeah, but lake monsters typically aren't. Like, they aren't
Yeah.
you don't hear about pulling, eating people or pulling swimmers down or anything like
No,
that, like
no, no. I think if you end up with anything with it's people panicking,
yeah.
like you make mention at one time where you were in the water and you thought something brushed up against your leg,
Yeah,
and so it could have been a fish, could have been,
it's
see,
lakeweed, you know?
it could have been. I was smart. I didn't swim in Lake Wanapitang. I remember those stories, but there was also a lot of bad currents and whirlpools. So
For sure, right? And that's
yeah.
just it. That could have been anything, but it just got me thinking, you know what I mean?
Mhm,
Thinking about the whole lake
mhm,
monster idea and the stories of Shuswagi and that lake and, Ogopogo, and
mhm,
that was an experience that stuck with me
mhm.
for whatever reason.
Well, I mean, your little boy liked monsters.
Oh, yeah. So
Yeah,
is there a
yeah, I
monster?
really
There are
like
monsters,
monsters. Still like
right?
monsters. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think do you find that maybe dealing in cryptids per se, and especially with so many sightings of Ogopogo, that it just seems a little bit more of a reality, potential reality happening as opposed to, let's say, the paranormal. I mean, paranormal is people see ghosts all the time. Other people see nothing, and other people, all the pareidolia. I mean, it's easy to see something that isn't there, and it doesn't matter what it is. But do you think that looking for something it's more tangible, let's say, like because there are so many Bigfoot sightings, there are so many sightings of Ogopogo, or is this is because 'cause they're Canadian sea monsters? Maybe that's why they're friendly. We're always friendly.
Oh, yeah.
Had to. Had
No,
to,
no, it's
sorry.
true. We'd be
Yeah,
polite, right? I'm
being
sorry, I didn't mean
polite,
to
and
bump
our
into you in the
Ogopogo is
water.
polite too.
Um,
Yeah, he's got manners, he's a perfect gentleman. So, right?
yeah, I think because it is supposed to be tangible, right? Like, so if it is flesh and blood, like, it is a tangible thing.
Yeah.
So it's something you can like, we have ways of determining whether a spirit's present or not.
Yes.
But either you see the monster or you don't.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people have mistaken stumps and bears for Sasquatch. That's fine, but
That's
and I
interesting.
guess you could misinterpret. There's I think I mentioned it, the person who believed they shot the video of Ogopogo and it turned out to be a beaver, and it was on Unsolved Mysteries. I remember watching that episode. But that's someone who's there's someone who's never been on a lake, clearly,
Yeah.
in Canada, and
The
seen a
beaver
beaver to
floating
know
on its
what,
back. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
what that is. So that does
Mm-hmm.
happen. People do misinterpret things, but
Mm-hmm.
um I think you've got a great when you have a sighting, you've got a greater chance of it being something tangible with when it comes to like a lake monster, especially if you're like clearly there's nothing else there.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
like people saying that Dale and Colleen took a picture of a dog swimming. Well, no, we were like, in the middle of the lake. That dog would have drowned by then. You know what I mean? And it's
Yeah. Yeah. They're resilient, but to a point,
to a point, or a duck diving into, like, there's just like, thinking of all these other things, but no, that you rule everything else out. They saw something. And it would be the same with some of the stuff John Kirk says he saw.
Mm-hmm.
He's a credible enough person. I believe he saw what he saw, and he shot video of it that,
Mm-hmm.
which we showed as well. And that's a very impressive video too that he shot.
Yeah. Well, yet he's like all on about the crawfish. So it's like,
There could be various reasons for that,
yeah,
as far as I'm
just,
concerned. But
yeah. I mean, I don't like to discount. I mean, people have different perceptions of
yeah,
what things are, and there's a reason for it, But I think that when you have the opportunity, I would love to see, oceanographers and such take a lot more interest. I mean, British Columbia has, like, being right on the Pacific like that. There's just so much potential for really good oceanographers and scientists to just come over. They're not that far from here.
3-hour drive.
Yeah.
It'd be a 3-hour drive.
Yeah,
Come up and look at it.
charter a boat and I mean, they have the equipment. I don't think it would be, well, I mean, it's easy for me to say, it wouldn't be that expensive, but but I mean, I don't know what equipment, what it takes to get it out of there. But I mean, if you're looking for something tangible and you have people in a sailboat who can just get it so easily, go back and recreate it. Like, have these guys ever tried to go back and recreate it at the same time of year and just see if they could get another photo, or it was one shot deal? We're
That was
happy with that.
October 2022 that we
Yeah,
were there in May of 2023. I'm not sure if they have, I mean, they're regular sailors. So, I mean, they've been
yeah.
sailing on that lake for years and not seen anything. So
Wow.
if they went back out in October, maybe they would. I should text them and ask them if they
It'd be
go.
curiosity, like, have you ever
Yeah.
tried to go back and just go back to the spot? Because obviously, it was quite content in this location. It didn't seem bothered by them at all. It would be curious to see if they haven't, if they would consider doing it. Maybe you
Yeah.
need to go
And
for a little, like, sailboat ride, Jason, and just
yeah,
see
go
if they
back out
would.
with them and just sit
Yeah,
there and wait, right? And just see
yeah.
what you see.
Mhm. I don't know. I personally think it's a grand idea,
I think
but,
it's fantastic too.
yeah.
And I think it'd almost be worth putting out a challenge to people like scientists. So why don't you just go and spend
Mm,
some time on the lake
mhm.
with all
Well,
your equipment and just to see, right? There hasn't been an expedition for a good long time. Like,
mhm. Well, apparently, yeah. I mean, apparently, though, they just now everything costs so much more money than it
yeah,
did back then as well. Maybe we just have to rely, maybe here's how you do it. Maybe we just need to rely on researchers such as yourself and Eli, and just put it out there and saying, look, we want to maybe do an edit on this documentary, do another documentary, maybe just we want to do this, we want to test it. People have all kinds of equipment out there. And you
yes, they
might
do.
be surprised as to how many people actually come forward and say, we want to try, but under
Yeah,
controlled conditions.
controlled conditions, in the interest strictly of seeing what evidence we could get.
Mhm.
We're not
Yeah.
hunting this thing. We're not
Mm.
trying. It's even protected by Greenpeace, and the province has said you're not allowed to hunt it or hurt it. That's actually written in law. So we're
Right.
just there
That's
to
great.
document whatever we can see.
That's great. Wow, I didn't know that. That's
Yeah, yeah,
fantastic.
they totally have. Like, it's illegal to hunt, harm, or shoot in any way Ogopogo.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, it's pretty bad. You have to actually put that in writing somewhere to make sure that
Well, because
nobody
you know,
does.
some dumbass is gonna try to do something with
I
it, you know
know.
what I mean?
I'm
Like,
glad you said it, not me.
well, they will though, that's the thing, right? Well, we'll prove once and for all. I'm gonna shoot it and drag its carcass on the shore, like, come on.
I know.
This would be such a rare endangered species.
Yeah.
Like, you wanna respect it and just leave it be, like, you know,
Mhm.
I think we forget that when we go looking for these kind of things, that it is a, you know, if
Mhm.
it is this animal, it is a rare, extremely rare, possibly on the bridge of becoming extinct species. You wanna preserve it as best you can
Mhm.
and let
You
it
do.
thrive.
You do. But you have to have a healthy respect for life
Yeah. I don't
to
know if we have that as our species has that anymore, you know what
I
I
know.
mean? As much.
No, I mean, there are some great people out there, but like you say, then you've got these other people who are on this quest to prove. I mean, you see it with Bigfoot all the time. They
Mhm.
go out and shoot this thing. What for? But I think there are actually some states where it is illegal. Like if you kill them, it's like murder. You get charged
Yeah,
for.
it's the same thing in certain states, right? They definitely want to
Mhm,
preserve Sasquatch, you know, because I think people I think, like, any of this, wouldn't it be awesome to say, "Yeah, prove 100% that these things are real,
mhm,
and that we're living alongside them,"
mhm.
and then just leave it be.
But in a perfect world.
Yeah, you would. It's like, "Okay,
Mhm,
we've got definitive proof that Ogopogo is real, now let's just leave it
mhm.
alone in the
Yeah.
water, let it do its thing,
Mhm,
you know, and we'll stay out of its way, and it's, clearly not interested in getting in our way," like,
mhm. Exactly. So, do you know, in the lake, do they lead to other does it lead to other lakes? Are there waterways that takes you out to the ocean per se, or is it
it
are you
does,
going
yeah.
south, south?
So Lake Okanagan, if you go down towards Penticton, there's kind of like a canal that goes to Skaha Lake, and then that leads to a river that leads to the Columbia River that goes out into the Pacific Ocean.
So is it quite a hike?
It'd be quite a trek. Like you would definitely for a species to make that trek, it would take a long time. But
Mhm.
salmon do it, like the salmon run it, they do it every year. So it is doable. I mean, the
Right.
argument people make is, well, we'd never see an Ogopogo in, you know, in the Columbia River, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, are you looking for Ogopogo in the Columbia River? Like
Is the Columbia River deep enough
it
for
is, it's deep
for a
enough. I think it
40-foot?
would be. I think it'd be like the Fraser River. There's parts where it's super deep and there's parts where it's more shallow. But you know,
Yeah.
but something
Yeah,
could make it for
right.
sure.
Hmm. So if it can move around that freely, it makes I could see how you would have other ones coming in, no problem.
Yeah, and coming and going, and so what people are seeing as the Cadborosaurus is probably also what people are seeing as Ogopogo. Like it's the same species
Mhm.
moving around.
I'm just listening to my wheels are turning, that's why I'm I'm just
That's
quiet.
okay.
So, no, it's very fascinating to me because, there's so many traditions, like you say this has been going on thousands of years, and they've always found a way, but now, unfortunately, we build everywhere.
Yeah,
And this is an area at one time that was it's still very sacred, but very sacred. Respect the water. Don't build here. And what do? We come
we built
around
there.
and we build there and just totally disrespect. I love how that was portrayed in the documentary. We do
I
what
think
we
that's important.
want. Yeah.
It was a very important part of the message. And that's something, I mean, Eli does more work with cryptids, you know, with his films with small town monsters, but he says every time, like when it comes to cryptid stories, the
Mhm,
environmental stories become a very important part of it.
mhm,
Because these are things that are existing in nature, and so in order to protect them, you need to protect nature itself, and that's kind of where these things go back and forth. I know when Seth Breedlove came up with the title "Cursed Waters," and people got kind of upset because what do you mean cursed waters? Well, it kind of does tie more into the environmental message with it. Like we are polluting this lake where this
mhm,
species is a living, and you're almost like cursing the water. And if it is the water spirit, then by cursing the water, you're putting the water spirit at risk. Um,
You are.
You are,
You are.
and, you know, and so then as, you know, Corley Miller said, it would be unhappy because it's not clean, you know, it's sick.
Mhm. Yeah, we in the modern era have totally lost touch with our own planet and environment. So it's very, very sad. It is. It is. We wanna conquer everything.
We do, it's in our it seems to be in human nature, and now there's, you know, yeah. Won't get on that tangent,
I know, we're
but
going down
we've
some
always
other
wanted
rabbit
to,
hole, aren't we?
but
Yeah.
every time we try to conquer nature, it makes a folly of us. That's the thing.
It's true.
Like, we've never mastered nature in any way, shape, or form.
Mhm.
And I don't think we ever will when it comes to things like like Sasquatch or an Ogopogo either. Like,
No, I think people don't realize that they are very sacred.
yeah,
They're very special, you know? I mean, have you heard of Ron Moorhead? You must have
yep,
heard of Ron
of
Moorhead.
course, yeah,
The Sierra Sounds. I love his approach on everything. He's such a gentle individual. It's just no wonder that he has the experiences that he
yeah.
has, you know? I mean, they're brilliant. You know, I have an elderly friend of mine who does a lot of energy work, and he's done incredible work with Sasquatch and Bigfoot. Totally can communicate and, this whole telepathic thing, and this guy is like he's elderly, and he's just like, "Well, because I'm not like everybody else," and he's really not.
No, I think when like there's a common thing when you do, because I've begun working on a Bigfoot documentary.
Mhm.
Um, and they wanted me to go out on an expedition by myself, which okay, fine, like I will, but
Count me in. All right.
you
Yeah.
don't find Sasquatch by looking for it. So my plan, and this is what everyone says who has an experience, just go camp,
Yeah.
light your fire, just sit there, stare at the moon, eat, and if something
Just
happens,
just
you can set up your trail cams and stuff like that and audio
yeah.
equipment, but
Yeah.
you can't like treat it like you're going hunting moose. Like people have their experiences when they're just sort of relaxing and chilling out
Yes. So do
in
you
the woods.
think, a telepathic thing, and I wonder if this would work with Ogopogo as well?
That is a really good question. Obviously, with the indigenous people, I think they did communicate in their own way
Yeah.
spiritually. I wouldn't say with telepathy, but I think it was more spiritual in nature. And I know the closest things I've had to Sasquatch experience would have been done more on, I think, the quantum,
Yes.
like the pure frequency level, like
Yes.
something letting me know it was there and I'd be feeling it and the need to get out of there. You know what I mean? Like I think
Yes. The fight
that's
or
the
flight kicks in, and that's
kicks
it.
in big time. And it was like, I'm
Yeah.
getting out. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that would be the same in terms of communicating, say, with an Ogopogo.
Yes. Well, I mean, they manage it. We had a lot of, I mean, the ancients always seemed to have a way to do this because they had a healthy respect. We all need to follow the ways of the indigenous. I completely agree
I
with
agree.
that. But I do believe that we can telepathically communicate with these beings, and you look at the size of Ogopogo, and you try you have to realize that people might look at that and go, "Oh, come on." You know, okay, you can't communicate like that, but because 'cause you're just this little wee little bitty person. But I think you could do it, and I'd be curious to see if anybody has ever tried, aside
Yeah.
from the indigenous. Like, now you wanna make a connection? That's your next mission, Jason. Get on that sailboat.
I have to figure out how to do that stuff first.
I know. You get on that sailboat, get your
But
team in place, get your camera ready, and just, zen
I'm
out.
going to will it to the surface.
Why not?
Well, like
Why not?
when you look at Colleen's story too, because I don't know if you remember that. She talked about it in the documentary, and it comes up in the book that like her mother
Mm,
had just died and she
mhm.
didn't want to go sailing on that October day that she saw it, but she sort of put it out to the universe that give me something to forget, just stop thinking about my mom for a while.
Yes,
And she has that experience.
it was great.
Like that's a pretty interesting little spiritual hook to that whole experience.
Well, it is because I love the comment, comment gives you big.
Yeah.
Like, you're not getting bigger than that, that's for sure. But
No,
but it
I think that's really
was.
neat that that happened,
It
like that's you can't just shrug that
You
off.
can't,
I
you
don't think
can't.
so.
See, it's one thing to look at the photograph, but when you look at the whole package, everything together, the fact that these people were there and that it was so calm, and the spiritual message and everything, it's like the perfect storm of an ideal situation,
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know?
that's how I see it too, right? You have to look at the whole experience. I find that with paranormal investigation, all this stuff, there's a whole experience to it
Mm,
that you can't explain. And then when you try to explain it to people, that's where the people get dismissive about it. It's you know what I mean?
mm,
Like because it's like the
mhm,
science doesn't want to look at the spiritual side of thing, but you got to look at when it comes to paranormal, you got to look at it from all the various angles, and that's where I
mm,
think you're going to get your answer. And I
mhm,
think it's a real opportunity for us as people
Mhm.
to engage with our planet in a very different way. Like we, as a team, we've always done investigations a little more on this, more on the scientific side of things, which is
Yes.
something we're not abandoning. But we have some people on the team now who are getting a little more, bring a little more spirituality to it. And Peter's saying when he first started in England, they did go more spiritual. You trusted your instinct and your feelings more.
Mhm.
And we're
Mhm.
trying to do that now too, with the scientific method also applied to it. And we've had some
Mhm.
really interesting experiences lately that way.
Mhm. Well, I like how you mentioned like the scientific aspect of it because science is like, oh yeah, we science in the field. So you're bringing a laboratory.
Yeah,
So,
into the
do
field.
you want to be technical? Oh, you mean tools of the trade? Okay, that's a bit different.
Yeah,
But I mean, I think technology is really, even in that field, has really picked up. There's some really like amazing people out there coming out with great, devices to try.
yeah,
I'm also people that think I like blinky things and stuff, not so much, but I've done a lot of events where people want to know, does it exist? Yes, it exists. Does
yeah,
it work? Well, no. Here's what it costs you, though, just so you can watch it blinky,
yeah.
So
A blinky light. Yeah,
these blinky lights. But I'm a firm believer, in the common sense and the pen and paper and just a regular camera. And I love doing voice recordings, and I'm old school. I still like tape.
the reel to reel tape. Yeah, that's awesome.
Any a cassette tape. I'll take what I
Yeah,
can get because when you're out in the field, you can't be lugging one of those big suckers around. But
no,
I
true.
do like, but I do like tape, and you don't record on the same side. Just having a bleed through. It's like I'm old school like that. I really dig that, and that's why I was so compelled when I saw this videotape. 1968. I'm like, see, it's simple,
Yeah,
but it's so effective because you can't debunk it.
no,
Like what's in this day and age, what's sad, I used to do these large events and I had a woman come up to me. She goes, I want to share a photo because we'd have about 120 people a night. She goes, I want to share a photo and a negative of a spirit that was captured at this location. I said, absolutely, come as my guest and you can, please share it up. Do you know that kids, even like into the teen years, had no idea what a negative was? They looked at that and they're like, what is that? She's like, really?
that's where the film comes from. That's
Yeah, I know. But it's like we're living in this digital age, and now we're getting into this age of AI. It's just like the meat and the bones of what old traditional research was. It's a thing of the past in so many ways now.
but I
You
think
know.
it needs to come back because I think that's where you're going to get
Yes.
the best evidence. Because again, like you say, you can't debunk it. You can't. That wasn't put in
You
after the
can't.
fact. That wasn't added. It's
Mhm.
digital's fine. I mean, I use a digital recorder because you can go
Sure.
back and you can clip it and you can do all this great stuff
Sure.
with it.
It's convenient.
It's convenient, but someone else can come up to me and say, "Well, you just put that in, and you went into WavePad after the fact, and you dropped in a sound effect." And it's like, "Well, no, I didn't
Yeah.
actually."
Yeah, but thank you.
But thank
You know,
you so much
but
for saying I'm a fraud. I appreciate that. you know.
do not know who I am. I'm a skeptical guy besides that. So I know but that is, I think, what we are going to be seeing more and more of. And I think moving forward, and I mean, I would love to see, full on research go on with Ogopogo. It's an incredible story. And when you see that photo, you realize that you see the gentleness about it. And I think people could look at that, but being so conditioned to believing that this isn't even a thing,
Yeah.
so it takes away from could be really a magical moment for some people who have been looking their whole lives for some kind of definitive as you can get. Enough definitive to make you want to go in. There's so many little blips of
Yeah.
information there to make you want to go in and actually find the definitive.
Yeah. Well, I know Eli and we scrutinized that photo and we agonized over that photo. And in the end, we came to the conclusion that we believe they took a picture of Ogopogo. Probably one of the more compelling pictures that's ever been taken of it.
I agree.
Um, and
I
I'm
agree.
sure that irks people who have been trying to get photographic evidence forever. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
Yes.
a couple of people on a sailboat got it.
Yes.
I think that's where some of that animosity comes from, and the naysaying. I that's just my opinion.
Mm. Well,
Um,
I respect you as a researcher. So, when you looked at that and said, "Yes, I believe this is what it is," because I know you don't just take things that lightly. You're
no,
not
no, you
You're
can't.
not Mr. Pareidolia.
No, 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 no,
You're
no.
gonna dissect something, right? You're going
Yeah,
to look at it and really look at it, and, you know, so when you're saying, "No, this is a thing," then I respect you as a researcher, say, "No, if he says it's a thing, it's a thing," because
I
you're not
appreciate
afraid
that.
to
Thank
say,
you.
"This isn't a thing." As much
Yeah,
as
no,
I'd
and
like
if I
to
didn't think it
believe
was
it's
a
a
picture, I
thing.
would say it. If I had thought, if there was
Yes,
any doubt in my mind, I wouldn't have said what I said. Like, any
exactly.
doubt in my mind.
Yeah, exactly. So now we're faced with, okay, there's this potential for really great research to happen, but we're beyond the digital age now. We're in the age of AI. Can you trust what's going to come out? Somebody out there is going to want to top that picture.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And and that video, and can are you going to be able how are you going to be able to even trust it now? Like, how do you filter through that as a researcher and a filmmaker?
So carefully, like, that's the thing. It makes it
You
like
sound so exasperated there for a minute.
I am. Well, I'm just saying, I watched a YouTube video today that was
Yeah.
entirely created with AI, and it was very convincing to me. It was just like a
Wow.
BS comedy thing, but I'm like, wait a minute, like that's
Yeah.
and so it
That's
makes you pause. Like, I think it's where you had your integrity, our integrity as investigators now matters more now than it ever has. I think.
Mhm,
Um, to kind of, I'm not big on like I've got to go out and make a name for myself, but if my work is important, so I've got to
mhm,
be very careful what I present and how I present it, and make sure
mhm.
it
Yes.
stands up to scrutiny, right? And I think
Mhm,
that's the only way. And then when stuff does come out, you've got to put it to the test. Like every little bit of
mhm.
footage that comes forward, you have to kind of really scrutinize it, and if you
Mhm.
can, like run it through. I don't know what they do, the accuracy, the tests for
Yes.
accuracy, that kind of thing, right? It used to be before you had to look for like the zipper on the the ape costume, and that was it. Or it
It was
was
so
really
easy
serious.
back then.
Or
Yeah,
someone making a
yeah.
foam latex model of a plesiosaur and putting it in Loch Ness, like
I know.
it's way
The
beyond that
tin pie
now. I
plate
mean,
from from the
yeah,
tree. Yes, yeah. I know. It's pretty bad, it shows your age a little bit when you actually remember stuff like that.
I
But
do though.
I know, same.
Simpler
Same.
times.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
I think it's gonna make our job a lot harder to be taken seriously. I think that's what it's gonna come down to, and we just have to really be extra careful in our investigative methods and our filming methods,
Mhm.
and just make sure there's not if we get something that it'll hold up, like,
Yeah.
against the other fake stuff
Mm.
or AI stuff. But even then, I think it's gonna be an uphill battle convincing people that a picture we took or a piece of video footage we took is real, unless maybe we do
Mhm.
rely more on get back to shooting on film, you know
Mhm.
what I mean? And doing, like, tape and things like that.
I'd love to see it go back to old school. I think, and maybe as researchers, that's what we have to start leaning on, no matter what you're researching. I mean, maybe we need to go back old school, go out there and find all these old cameras and just keep it simple. Because I mean, let's face it, right now, what drives people? Media drives people.
Mhm.
And I don't think, well, I know, you know, I have filmed with some great people, and I have filmed with some people that are questionable, and they don't necessarily do their homework on, you know, on the research. Because it's about the ratings.
Yeah.
Show us what you have, and I think in a way that's like a double-edged sword because now you're being hindered by that. So how many people are going to go out for that magical shot? Because we have media now that has become so comfortable with saying, "Hey, if you have something, just email us and we're going to put you
Oh,
on a
paranormal
show."
caught on camera or something
Hello,
like
you
that,
took
right?
the words right out of my mouth. See,
Yeah.
you can say things that I can't
I've
say
watched
because you're
that
the guest.
show,
I know.
in a
And
hotel room when I had nothing else to do.
right, I
Like,
dig the show, I dig the show, it's got some cool stuff, some
it
people get
does.
really great stuff, but I think it's shows like that, for example, that are going to draw in a whole other genre of people with respects to, us filmmakers or they're going to have to start being more diligent about some of the information or some of the stuff they're looking at.
There was one I saw, it was, a haunting at this ranch house, and, Kieran O'Keefe was on it. And he was really said he
Yes.
was really excited because he goes,
Yeah.
"This is either the most elaborate hoax I've ever seen, or they've
Yeah.
captured the most compelling evidence
I
of a
know.
haunting ever," because it had everything you'd want from a haunting.
Yeah. But see, he's logical too, like
He's
yourself.
super
Like, he's
logical.
just
I think he
exactly.
leaned it towards it being a hoax in the end, but it was because it was
Yeah.
just too much. It was too I mean,
Yeah.
I would make a case study out of that house. I'd buy it off the people and kick them out and stay there for the rest of my life and just document it if it was that active. You know what I mean? Like, it was
Yes.
too much. But I think
Yes.
that's the risk, because people now will want to be on a show like that, so they're gonna make this stuff up to be that
Mhm.
interesting where it will get on television.
I won't say these kind of places don't exist. I mean, I've
Oh, they do,
investigated
for sure.
great places. I mean, we've had a place that was ridiculously haunted, but you would have to be camped out like 24/7 just for some random event to happen. It'd be a good one, but
Yep.
it's not gonna happen the way like, you can't just sit there and it's not like a circus act.
No, it's not. We go to Gooding, Idaho, where there's a tuberculosis clinic, and we
Mhm.
will spend 5 full days, 24/7 there hanging out, and
See?
we get amazing stuff, but we're living there. Like,
Exactly.
that's how you get it,
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
know?
And people will say, "Have you ever had experience at the house?" All the time. But it's when you least expect it. I'm not sitting
Yep.
with the camera going, "All right."
Now it's
I'll
time.
I'll
Go
I'll
jump
walk into
for
the
me.
house, the door will swing open, and I'm like, "Hello?" You know? So this house is quiet. I sold that house. This house is quiet. I like it. I
Yeah,
like it. It's a welcome change because, you live in a highly active location. It gets to be a bit much. But,
they can, yes. It wears
you
you
know,
out really quick.
it does. It
Yeah.
does. But, I'm so glad that you just came on and talked about this because it was such I enjoy the book so much,
Thank you.
honestly.
Thank you so
I
much.
yeah, I can't tell you. You covered pretty much everything. You covered your bases. I love the experiences. I love everyone you talked to. And then, of course, when I saw Chris Waters, I'm like, okay, see right here.
Yeah.
It's like a perfect handbook to go with this documentary. And it just really puts into perspective because I can read it and I felt like I was experiencing it with you. And in the same breath, and when I'm seeing the film, I'm like, okay, see, this is exactly what you envisioned. Like you wrote it the way it was. It was great.
Thank you so much. That's what I was really, really trying to do. Like, it was yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Oh, you did, you did. So in closing, you are going back, yes?
I will, of course, I'll be going back to Lake Okanagan.
We have missions now, so yeah.
Eli and I always joke about cursed waters too. We don't know what it would be or if it would even happen, but we always joke about there's so much more that could be done with Ogopogo. Like, and
I absolutely think there is. I mean, have you thought about just going and camping out on along the shores even at night?
oh yeah,
And
yeah. I think that'd be something. It'd be neat to do this summer, like even with the team, just to go hang out on the shore and just to see
yeah,
what happens, right?
yeah, absolutely. I love it. Night vision,
Yeah. Night vision, go swimming, like Dave Schrader told me to do, and see what we
go
can get find.
swimming, go
Yeah.
swimming. But like I said, you shouldn't be biting Dave Schrader.
I shouldn't. I
Always
should only
easy
say
to be
come.
on the other side of the coin, but you know, okay, man, this is it. Like brotherhood.
We're gonna do this.
Exactly, exactly. No, I love it. And do you have any more books coming up? Yes?
I have started writing a book about well, I've done my first draft about the Wendigo,
Mm, get
which
me
I just said
started
it,
on the
so I'm doomed
Wendigo.
myself.
I know,
So,
right?
but yeah,
That
no, I've researched and written a book on Wendigo, and, there's stuff going on with that project as well that will be we
yes.
can talk about more next year.
Yeah, no, that's okay. We'll have you come back on if you're willing,
I would
because
love
that
to.
again, it's a Canadian thing,
It
and
is, and it is, and it's such a compelling story.
it people don't realize just how many of them they have a far reach. Here in even Southern Ontario, we have visions or sightings of things that are
Yeah. Well, it
crazy
goes
that
down
we
into Missouri, parts of the States even has it and stuff like that, but I
yeah,
ended up doing some, expedition and some research up in Edmonton, north of Edmonton, where, like, the
yeah.
Swift Runner story happened and all that stuff, and yeah,
It's going to be outstanding, I know it
and it's
is.
gruesome. It's like true crime meets paranormal. It's pretty wild.
I'm excited already. I know.
Awesome.
I know. I did one I worked with one family, and they were in an indigenous place, of course, in Ontario, in the Muskokas, and one of our team members at the time was indigenous, This kid was as cool as a cucumber. I call him a kid because I'm just considerably older than he was, but he's just calm. And we were leaving, and it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and it was just it was a weird experience, that whole investigation. And something yells out like a freaking Xena war cry, like a total screaming 3 a.m. out of the woods. And this kid looks at me and goes, "That's just a Wendigo." Just like that. And I'm like, just like that, is it?
It's just the Wendigo, huh?
That's just, but it's the voice. "That's just a Wendigo." And I'm like, "Get a car! We're going right now."
We are leaving.
Exactly. Exit stage. Exit stage left. That's it. Yeah. So I never heard anything like that. And to this day, not because not like I hear them every day, but from what I've heard, like he's telling us about some of the indigenous lore out in the Muskokas, he goes, no, he goes like that. They're really high pitched. Some of them are like screechers,
Mhm.
So I was just like,
it's one of those, it's almost like Sasquatch too. Depending on where you're hearing the story, they're different. It's
yes.
a little bit different, like the experiences, but there's also so many similarities.
Yeah. It was sort of a
Oh, that's a
like
terrifying thing to hear.
it was. I'm like, "God, sounds like Xena." And he goes, "That's just the Wendigo." Good to know. Thank you for that. I will never leave my mind ever again.
Ever again.
No, so open-minded and kind of, cool as a cucumber. I'm just like, how do you sleep at night? But anyway, thank you so much for joining me this evening. Honestly, it was just wonderful to catch up with you, and wonderful to hear about this incredible place, this incredible being. I hate saying like sea monster. It's just,
No,
it's a gentle feel to it.
it is. Yeah, even the term lake monster to me seems a bit off. Like
Yeah.
it's a being is a great way to put it.
Yeah. It's beautiful. When you look
Yeah.
at that picture, you feel the calm with it, and you look into the eyes, and it has this beautiful feel. So for all you naysayers out there, I don't want to hear it. Mason said it's good, darn it.
I appreciate that. Thanks so much for having me on, Michelle. It's always a pleasure to come on and chat with you.
Thank you. And I'm hoping we can do it again. You let me know when that Wendigo book.
I will, absolutely. You'll be one of the first people I contact. It's coming out, and
No,
let's go.
do it. Yeah. Yeah. But do it in the winter time, because that way you're not so busy during the summer.
Yeah, well, we'll see.
I know. I'm just playing with you. No, it's great. Well, you make sure that you're safe out there, because you've got a lot of stuff coming up, and don't just go jumping in the water at night.
No.
I ain't looking at that, but yeah.
I'll be careful. I'll make sure there's lots of people around.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. That's
Yeah.
good. And I'm hoping, I mean, if you get some great stuff, I'd love to do a follow-up.
For sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. I would love to. Yeah, hopefully this summer I'll be able to go and do something with that
Yeah.
whole idea. I mean, and I liked your TV show idea. Like I don't know how, but that would be a great way to do it.
Oh, there are always ways.
There's always ways.
It just takes the right people. That's what I'm saying. Like you get things, and you're coming up with tidbits of stuff, and you put that all together. It's amazing what you can get done with there. In fact, now when you've got platforms like Netflix and Amazon, for example, you don't even have to be like a big, huge production company anymore. You get more coverage on these platforms.
You do.
You know,
You
but
do actually. Yeah. You just need to have the right connection to make that to
you
get to one
do.
of them, and then boom, can take off.
You do, you do. I'll put some feelers out. Happy to do that.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. No promises, but I know people. Yeah, I think it would be a wonderful story. I think it'd be a wonderful series, because when you're out there, if you're staying out there, living out there, even if you decide, okay, we're going to do this, and we're just going to go and spend a summer, and you just the day-to-day activity of the research of it, to me, would be quite interesting.
I think so too, right? And that's something that I think gets lost in some of these shows. Like there's a process to this when you're doing it. And then we tried that with We Want to Believe. We wanted to show the process.
Yes.
If you get something, that's just icing on the cake, right? But it's showing the way that these really go down, these investigations. I think that'd be great for something like an Ogopogo
Okay.
expedition as well.
Oh yeah. Just have a vision of you out on the boat at night in the water, just waiting.
Just wait, night vision on and seeing what happens.
That's right. There we go. It might work. Oh, thank you so much. You're a good sport.
Thank you, Michelle. No, it was awesome. This was a great conversation. I always enjoy it.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you to everybody in chat. God, you guys are just a whole lot of fun. And so I usually put a lot of comments up, but I was sort of like into this too, to the point where my wheels just get turning every time Jason started getting this. Like, yeah, I just go there like a squirrel sometimes. Anyway, okay, guys, Tuesday, Beyond the Outer Realm, the new show, brings on Carol Ann Iderola for an uncensored discussion. It's going to get into my lab. It's going to get into weather. It's going to get into CERN. It's going to get into some just stuff that you're not going to find anywhere but Rumble by the time she's done with me, I'm sure. And we have open mic on Wednesday. Again, part 2. Guest host Wayne Mallow. Is going to be a lot of fun. It's a laid back week for me. I'm exhausted. Anyway, Thursday, Melissa McClellan and Adriana Fiorestu, very dear friends of mine, teammates of mine. And everybody keeps asking me about Romania, Hoya Baciu Forest. You've heard me talk about it, but these gals are the ones that were there with me, and we've all had incredible experiences, and it has a very long reach because some of these experiences continued on, for up to a couple of years, mostly to them because I'm kind of a good kid and I don't do stupid shit. So, it kind of went in a whole other direction. Anyway, it was a lot to talk about, And I think they're going to bring some photos and, because I can never find anything, and some recordings and things like that. So it's another example of having a healthy respect for nature. So have healthy respect for nature, because the old saying, there are things in them their woods. There sure and heck were things in them their words. What those things were, I guess that's what the conversation is going to be about. So thank you, United Public Radio. Thank you, Folgers. Thank you, Justin Snicker. Thank you, Steve McGinnis. Thank you all to everyone who participated in chat tonight. Thank you, Jason. And everybody have a great weekend. And we'll see you Tuesday afternoon for Beyond the Outer Realm. Good night.
Good night.